Welcome to the R&L Revolution Nothing Less show. This is episode number 158, July 27th, 2023. My name's Andy Zee. I'm the host of the show, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. This is a show for everyone who is sick at heart at the way the world is today, who can't stand the way this system oppresses and brutalizes people here and around the world just for who they are: immigrants, refugees, women, black people, Latino people, LGBTQ people. This is a show for everyone who is righteously furious that those who rule this system are destroying the earth and are bringing the world closer to nuclear war. This is a show for everyone who yearns for a whole other way we could be living. This is a show about revolution. Each week, we dig into the roots of events in the world to show why only revolution and nothing less will address and redress all the things that you care about. Why? Because brutal and murderous white supremacy, male supremacy, and other oppressive relations, the deepening crisis in society and the world overall, including the constant wars and the continuing destruction of the environment, all this cannot ultimately be resolved in any positive way within the confines of the system that rules in this country and dominates the world as a whole, the system of capitalism imperialism. And we bring to you why in this moment, this time that we're living through, that revolution in this country is more possible. Why the deep divide among the rulers of the United States provides the opening to be seized for a real revolution. And this will be a big focus of today's R&L show.
My name is Sunsara Taylor. I'm the co-host of the Revolution Nothing Less show. And here on this show, we bring you the goal of this revolution, the emancipation of all of humanity, and the leadership that we have for this revolution. Bob Avakian is a revolutionary leader like no one else alive on this planet today. He is the real deal. He is not trying to sell you on some kind of lie that you can make it if you try, or somehow you can reform this system that we live under, capitalism, imperialism, into being anything other than the monstrous, murderous, planet-destroying system that it is. He roots himself in the scientific understanding that this system cannot be reformed and must be overthrown and replaced with a radically different socialist system on the road to real emancipation. And he has even written the Constitution that will govern and set the direction for this new liberating society after the revolution has been made.
So, Sunsara, in today's show, we're going to open up where I speak with Paul Street, a historian and a writer, about some recent serious exposures in the media about the fascist preparations for a Trump or other fascist Republican regime in 2025.
Yeah, and we'll follow that up with some discussion of the importance of science and looking beneath the surface. And to get into that, we're going to bring a portion of the extraordinary interview that we did with Bob Avakian last fall, where he answers this question of what is science and its importance. And then Andy and I will talk more about this rare time that we're in when revolution is more possible. And then we'll hear from Rafael Kadaris talking about and taking down this atrocious, racist, pre-Civil War lynching song that's been put out recently by the country music singer Jason Aldean. Try that in a small town. And Rafael will have plenty to say about that.
Following that reactionary garbage, we are going to honor an artist of integrity and beauty, Sinead O'Connor, who died this past week.
And we'll close out today's show with an excerpt from a talk that Raymond Lotta gave up at Revolution Books in Harlem, New York City this past Tuesday night about the film Oppenheimer, called Robert Oppenheimer Served America's Empire. We have the responsibility and possibility to end this horror and bring a far better world into being. So with that, let's dive in.
I want to welcome Paul Street, a frequent guest of the R&L Revolution Nothing Less show. He's a creator of the Paul Street Report on Substack, a contributor to Counterpunch. He's a member of the editorial board of Refuse Fascism. And Paul, how you doing? I hear you're in the middle of climate catastrophe or close to it where you're at.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I am on an attic floor it's about 97 degrees outside, but I should be able to hold out for a good half hour before I faint.
So look, Paul, on the RNL show, we've been bringing to our viewers an understanding that we are living in a period that comes but rarely in a powerful imperialist country, a period when a real revolution's become more possible. And the hold of the system's ideas and the way it rules and the ability to enforce its rule over people is profoundly frayed right now because the rulers of this country are not just seriously divided, but they're actually split apart, with the fascist Republican Party no longer believing in what have been the normal ways that this capitalist imperialist democracy has been ruled. And as you're familiar with, and we've talked about this, Bob Avakian has made the sharp analysis that this crisis and these deep divisions in society can only be resolved through radical means, either murderously oppressive and destructive means or emancipating revolutionary means. But what we're going to be talking about is the radical reactionary revolution has initiative, and it's unfolding out of the workings and the crisis of this system and the unresolvable, irreconcilable conflict with the other section of the ruling class. And it's given rise to this tremendous divide that does open up the possibility of which I just spoke. So, Paul, today we want to dig into some of the key developments of the fascist Republican Party. Last week, Paul, the New York Times, The Economist, and the New Republic all ran major pieces on the extensive fascist organizational infrastructure, policies, and strategy to implement a fascist agenda and political structures under a second Trump regime. The policy positions are summarized on the Trump campaign website under the heading Agenda 47, which stands for the fascist agenda after Trump becomes the 47th president. So I want to begin our conversation by asking you to summarize and to comment on what we learned from this new material that has come out in the liberal media.
Yeah, sure. And I add the Atlantic to that too. There's a recent piece in the Atlantic very much along these same lines. You know, you mentioned Avakian, Bob Avakian. I've heard him more than once quote. He has a favorite passage from W.B. Yeats: "The center cannot hold. The worst are full of passionate intensity, and the best lack all conviction." And of course, that's a reference to the intense fighting spirit on the right, and unfortunately, the hollow resistance and passivity on much of what passes for the center and the left right now. But it's not just passionate intensity that the right has right now. They have the Supreme Court. They have numerous state governments. They have a disproportionate share of the firearms that are loose in this country. They have an army of election workers all the way down to the precinct level, who are ready to try and cancel the 2024 election if it doesn't go that way. They have a potent, classically fascist, classically Hitlerian lie about an allegedly stolen election in 2020 that is accepted by most of their frothing base. And now, this time, they have a fully worked up, and this is very different than 2015 and 2016, they have a fully worked up and detailed policy plan for drastically increased, authoritarian executive branch power to fundamentally remake the political superstructure of this country and this society along fascist, Christian, white nationalist lines. This time around, Trump has an army of revanchist policy wonks from the Heritage Foundation, the Claremont Institute, Project 25, CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Coalition, and other horrific right-wing outfits like that. I love that CPAC calls itself the Conservative Political Action Coalition because there's nothing conservative about this agenda. It's a radical agenda, a radical right-wing agenda, a neo-fascist agenda. They say they want to dismantle the deep state. They say they want to tear down what they call the administrative state. But what they really mean is they want to take over the state, the deep state, the administrative state, and turn it into a fascist, authoritarian state ruled from the top down. And the components of their plan, this is a detailed, worked up policy agenda. And if you want, I can get into some more details about it. There are four basic components of it, and they are clear as day. Component one, crush the independence of all the hybrid congressional and executive branch agencies, which are able to, whose heads are often operate without direct control all the time from the president, and whose heads can't just be automatically fired by the president, like the FCC, which is in charge of media, like the FTC, which is in charge of antitrust laws, like the FDA, which is in charge of regulating the pharmaceutical industry, and all the way down the line. It's way beyond what you hear in the media a lot, that he's going to turn the Justice Department and weaponize it against his political enemies. Of course he's going to do that, but he wants to go much deeper into the whole federal congressional structure, further than any president has ever gone since FDR in the 30s, in a very different kind of way. The second part of it is he wants to strip employment protections. We heard about this back during the Trump, at the end of the Trump administrations. It was called Plan F. He wants to take away civil service protections from literally thousands of executive branch employees, fire them, and replace them with toadies whose sole qualification for working in various parts of the federal government is that they are loyal to him. The third part is he wants to scour all the top leadership positions of intelligence, of diplomacy, and of defense, and put people in charge that are just their own sole qualification is fealty to dear leader Donald Trump. This time around, this guy wants a military that will go out and crush in the streets of America the next George Floyd rebellion. And the last part is something called impoundment, which is just basically reserving to himself the right to not spend funds that he is legislatively and congressionally sworn to spend. So if he doesn't want to spend on clean water, or he doesn't want to spend on civil rights protections, or if he doesn't want to spend for the Department of Justice to look into white supremacist militias slaughtering civil rights protesters in the street, then he doesn't fucking have to. Impoundment.
You made an important comment, which I'd like you to speak, we should elaborate on. They say they want to demolish the deep state, but actually what they want to do is take over the deep state, and they'll rebrand it into, the state of the people or something like that, which that they actually control. And, in these articles of where and listening to their people, here's a quote, from Trump himself, where we've had it on our show. You've quoted it as well. In Michigan, he says, "We will expel the warmongers from our government. We will drive out the globalists. We will cast out the communists, Marxists, and fascists. And we will throw off the sick political class that hates our country." So these are all words that speak to a social base that he has whipped up. But it's not something separate from this policy, which is one of the points I'm trying to actually bring out for people to see. This is not just your point, not just the ravings of a lunatic, but actually the person who can clear the ground and mobilize the forces for a program that's been worked on for decades now.
I don't want viewers to underestimate how dangerous this is, and how even dangerous it is understood to be, not just in radical circles like ours, but even in relatively bourgeois, moderate, but intelligent and perceptive circles. So, for example, Bryn Tannehill, who is by no means a Revcom or a Marxist or a leftist or whatever that means anymore, is in the New Republic just this week. And she actually said this. She actually wrote this at the end of an article in which she dealt with a lot of the things that we're talking about. She says, the United States is probably, this is Bryn Tannehill, of a graduate of the Naval Academy, okay? I just wanted, to read what she wrote in the New Republic recently. The United States is about to have a, quote, fuck around and find out moment that's lethal to our form of government as we know it. And for her, that means democracy. The rapidity of the collapse, she said, is going to be terrifying. It will rival the end of the Weimar Republic in terms of its swiftness and how far it swings away from democracy and human rights. It will come like a tidal wave, she writes, so much so fast that civil rights organizations won't have the resources to fight more than a fraction of it. And she says the result will be like a sandcastle walls trying to hold back a tsunami. Now, that's very fatalistic, and that presupposes that we don't rise up and say to this fascist, many-sided fascist movement that you'll have to go through us to get to that point. But this is how dire she understands the menace facing the country. And this is not from an especially radical perspective, and if people are thinking like that at that level, that's very reflective of divisions within the elite, the kinds of things that Avakian has been writing about, really, not just recently, but for years.
So people know, so here's just some of the titles, and this goes on for pages. Agenda 47, Day 1, Executive Order ending citizenship for children of illegals and outlawing birth tourism. Agenda 47, protecting students from radical left and Marxist maniacs infecting educational institutions. Agenda 47, ending the nightmare of homeless, drug addicts, and the dangerously deranged. So this just goes on. Agenda 47, firing the radical Marxist prosecutors, destroying America. Agenda 47, President Trump's plan to dismantle the deep state and return power to the American people. So we have this agenda, a full-out fascist agenda, and I've read maybe 5 or 6 things from it. I don't know, there's dozens and dozens of these policy positions that are this way. At the same time, the second thing we've talked about, and that is very important for people to get, is that there are personnel, hundreds of people working on this way to give the new President Trump, or whatever fascist president comes to power, the right to fire people who aren't loyal, and they already have the lists of the people who are loyal to replace them. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. Well, this is a vision, and it's a detailed vision for a sweeping transformation of the entire political superstructure, and reaching down beyond that, the transformation of the society. It's an attempt to create a new way of life animated by a Christian, white, nationalist, patriarchal vision of what America is supposed to be and what life is supposed to be like in this country. And yeah, this Agenda 47 will tire you out reading it, because it's got a whole bunch of different angles. They want to transform education. They want to transform immigration. They want to transform everything in this very darkly revanchist and reactionary kind of way. The personnel transformation that Trump wants to have in this government, geared around personal fealty towards him. And this is a defining characteristic and aspect of fascist movements. And it's really chilling, and it's extraordinary. And
I think we should kind of wrap up here. And, I hope to see you on the show.
Super. Very good.
Okay.
Hey, Andy, it was really great to see Paul back on the show.
Yeah, and he was sweltering up there in the attic.
I'm really glad you didn't let him pass out.
All right. Well, no, he didn't pass out. But he passed out some really important information on the Trump Agenda 47 and the purging of institutions of government of any and all personnel, including people with expertise in different fields, and replacing them with Trump fascist loyalists. All of this is going to have an enormous, horrific impact on people's lives should they succeed in this. Imagine if the National Institute of Health was staffed by anti-science scientists, anti-vaxxers, these few lunatic outliers who went and, were recommending all these quack solutions. All of this, though, that's just one of the institutions. All of this is going to accelerate the imposition of really shocking fascist policies. I just read a few of them, and just to get an example of what this is like, Sunsara, it was the taking away of the right to abortion, which was a bitter taste of what is to come. And I just want to clear one thing up. When the fascists speak of the deep state, which Steve Bannon did, and Paul Street was repeating that, what they're mainly referring to are these institutions of the whole bureaucracy that actually makes the government run, and they're particularly concerned with taking over the deep state of the security apparatus and judicial apparatus. And what about the Democrats, the other ruling class party? On our website are 7 key points for organizing for a real revolution, and it says this: the Republican Party no longer believes in or feels bound by what have been the norms of democratic capitalist rule in this country. And the other section of the ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party, has no real answer to this. except trying to maintain the normal way that the oppressive rule of this system has been enforced for hundreds of years, while the fascists are determined to tear up those norms and rule through more openly and aggressively oppressive means without the traditional disguise of supposed democracy for all. It is this divide, this rupture in the way that this country has been ruled, that opens up the possibility for revolution. Before getting deeper into this rare time when revolution becomes more possible, we need to recognize that this possibility is not so readily and so easily seen. In an important recent article on revcom.us by Bob Avakian titled "Revolution, Major Turning Points and Rare Opportunities," he says this, quote, "The possibility of making revolution in this rare time may not be, and generally is not, immediately apparent. And on the contrary, what is more readily seen on the surface is the way in which, in the short term, the situation is worsening. The point is that all of this can only be correctly grasped and acted on with a consistently scientific method and approach. One of the most important things that such a scientific method and approach makes clear is this: revolutions are made possible in the most fundamental sense as a result of the intensification of the contradictions of the oppressive system, leading to crucial turning points, providing rare opportunities for major revolutionary advance, even potentially opening the way for the victory of the revolution," end quote.
You know, the emphasis that B.A. puts in that quote that you just read, and that he puts throughout pretty much all of his work and leadership, on the need for science and the need to look beneath the surface, beneath what's readily apparent on the surface, to what's underlying it, what's driving things, is it's really at the heart, not only of how we recognize the revolutionary potential in this moment, but also to seize that, to carry it forward, and to change the world in the most radical way. So this was a big question. It's a big question in society. It's a big part of the questions that we put to Bob Avakian last fall when we interviewed him. What is science? And he gave a very popular breakdown of it, and we want to share that with you now before we go any further in this discussion.
I think it would be really helpful for our audience to hear from you a very basic understanding of what is science and why is it so important, when, particularly at a time when so many people, including among the oppressed, are, "Oh, science, I'm not going to get vaccinated. I'm not going to do any of this. Who knows what this is all about?" So I think it's very important for people to understand what it, in its essence, actually is.
Look, science, you know, there's an interview with Ardea Skybreak, Science and Revolution, and she makes a point and emphasizes it. Science is an evidence-based process. You go by you interact with the larger reality. You gather evidence and facts about, you know, what that shows, what comes forward, what the evidence is about different phenomena, different parts of reality. And then that's the raw material from which you then look to see what are the patterns in that reality, what, you know, might be superficial, what's deeper, what are the underlying causes of it. You know, you have to go to work to do that. And then you analyze that, and then you synthesize it. You draw together the essential things that you can learn from that about the patterns in reality and underlying driving forces in reality. That's what science does in any particular. It's just a way of engaging and learning from reality by applying the method of analyzing what you're learning from interacting with reality, and then drawing together the key things to get to the core, the essence of what that shows. And, you know, this is in whether it's medicine or any other, you know, physics, you know, biology, archaeology, any other sphere of science. This is what people who are applying the scientific method are doing. And, you know, a lot of people these days are anti-scientific, and they don't want to hear about science because, well, some things have been really terrible things have been done in, you know, in the sphere of medicine, you know, like the Tuskegee experiment, you know, where they let black people who had syphilis just suffer from it, to, you know, to see what would happen. And there have been other things, you know, of that sort. But Skybreak also makes the point that that's bad science. Mm-hmm. And you can use the good science, the actual scientific method that I was just speaking to to actually learn about reality and to refute the bad science. And, you know, some people say, you know, and it's understandable, people say, especially people who are oppressed, well, they've lied to us about everything. They lie to us, you know, about the history of the country. They lie to us about the present reality of the country. They lie to us about how people are treated in this country now. You know, they just lie. So why should we believe anything they say? And the answer to that is you shouldn't believe anything they say, quote unquote, but you should apply the scientific method to actually investigate reality and then do the work to determine what that actually shows. You know, and for example, vaccines. All right, you know, yes, it's true. The ruling class, you know, down through history here in this country and other places, carried out terrible things in the name of science, including medical science. But then if you analyze further, like, do you really think, for example, the ruling class of this country wants total chaos where everybody is so sick that they can't even go to work, that the economy breaks down, that they're weakened in the international arena where they're contending with other imperialists like Russia and China, you know? But more to the point, look at the actual evidence. Millions of people have gotten vaccines. There are almost no serious side effects from all this. Look at the actual evidence. Don't look at what somebody says on the social media. I mean, you can look at it, but then compare it to reality. Mm-hmm. You know, look at the actual evidence about, that's how you know. Kyrie Irving and apparently Shaquille O'Neal and some of these other fools talking about how the world is flat. You know, well, look at the evidence. Is there any evidence to show that the earth is not flat, that it's actually round? There's plenty of scientific evidence. You can look into it yourself and you can determine for yourself what's true. And that's what the scientific method is. And everybody, not just scientists, but everybody when they're dealing not only with natural phenomena such as hurricanes, you know, are hurricanes, do they occur because God wants to punish America because it's letting gay people have rights? That's what Christian fundamentalists say. Is that the truth? Or do hurricanes happen because a whole bunch of people in Philadelphia sneezed at the same time? You know, or is there actually some real causes of hurricanes? What are they? You know, look into it. Determine for yourself what the evidence shows on the basis of actually rationally engaging reality and looking at it and then synthesizing the evidence. Yes, the earth is actually round. I mean, I don't know if he's joking or not, but I read a statement by Shaquille O'Neal where he said, well, I've flown from one part of the world to another and I never tipped over, so how could it be round? I mean, I'm sorry, but you know, first of all, Shaquille O'Neal's a pig anyway, and proud of it. If you don't believe me, go check it out. You know, he brags about how he went on raids with the drug administration and stuck some drug dealers or alleged drug dealers' face down in the toilet. So, you know, I don't have anything good to say about Shaquille O'Neal to begin with, but this is a world-class level of ignorance to talk about that. I mean, if you put an ant on a basketball and it goes around the basketball, it's not going to flip over, okay? You know, and the same thing is true with the big sphere of the earth compared to a tiny airplane, okay? The airplane goes around like an ant going around a basketball. You're not going to flip over just because it's round, okay? I mean, but you know, don't take my word for it. Go do some work. That's one of the things we talk about in the culture, the lack of curiosity, you know, just laziness. You know, people not really wanting to do, you know, don't want to read a book, don't want to learn about history. You know, okay, maybe I'm overstating, it's not everybody, but it's way too much a phenomenon in the culture. You know, the lack of curiosity, it's one of the striking things. How are you ever going to bring into being a better world if you're not curious, including about the way the world is and why it's the way it is? So, you know, do some work. You know, this is work anybody can do. Anybody can look into the evidence. Anybody can, you know, apply the scientific method to determine what's true. And that's what people need to do. I've said it before. Don't believe anything on faith. But go by the evidence. Go by the scientific method to determine what's actually true and not what's a bunch of bullshit that some people put out there, you know, to try to mislead you or because they themselves are misled. You know, and may make you feel good for a little while, but it isn't going to change anything that makes you feel bad.
That question bears rewatching and really thinking about in relationship to all the events that happen in the world and how the system works and what is to be done about it. And that followed a first question when we played a little bit of Stevie Wonder, and I asked him, what about what Stevie Wonder is saying, when you believe in things that you don't understand, you suffer? And Bob Avakian went into really an incredible answer that led into the question of science and overlapped with it on the role of religion in keeping people from really understanding the problem we face and the solution.
That's right. And once again, this is taken from the 3-part major interview that we did with Bob Avakian last fall here on the Revolution Nothing Less show, which is an incredible up close and personal experience with this most important leader and thinker in the world today, revolutionary leader Bob Avakian, where you get to know him intimately. He shares so much. I mean, you get a taste of it with him talking shit about Shaquille O'Neal in the midst of breaking down science and other things for good reason. But you get a much deeper sense of who this leader is as a person, what shaped him, and the kind of world he's fighting for, the strategy to make it possible, the constitution he wrote for the new socialist republic. And it really, it's an expansive interview, and it is so for this moment in history as well, a time when the future hangs in the balance. So we really want to urge everybody watching to not only go and watch all 3 parts of this interview, whether you've watched it before or not, but also to be part of spreading it. We're on a mission right now to get this interview seen by thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and really millions. It can change the political polarization atmosphere, what millions of people are thinking about, debating, doing with their lives, and it actually can play a pivotal role in shaping the future.
If you think, well, maybe that sounds good, but I don't think revolution is possible, you need to watch this interview, because he breaks this down in a many-faceted way, and the questions that we asked him are questions that you have. That's how we pick the questions. There are things that come up, and he answers them in a way that is just enables people to not just understand what he's saying, but to then go and run with it.
You know, just one further thing is, we ask questions people have, but we also asked about things that people are not yet even thinking to ask.
That's true.
The question, because Bob Avakian is coming from the reality, a scientifically grounded understanding that a whole different world is possible, a revolution and a way to solve the very things that you and Paul were talking about, the very things that we'll be playing in a few minutes from Rafael about these white supremacists summoning people. This country music singer is one of them, to Civil War, a lynching song. And Raymond Lotta later talking about the atomic bomb and Oppenheimer. And so people are living in the world that is of this system and they can't see beyond it. And I just want to say this in this moment, and it has to do with the conversation that we're about to have on it being a rare time when revolution is more possible. For this interview and this leader to be known when people are starting to come up against the way that profound things are changing rapidly can really open a pathway to the future.
So, Sunsara, let's take a few minutes and get a little bit deeper into this rare time off of the discussion I had with Paul Street. Paul Street referred to the poet W.B. Yeats and read this quote that he said, correctly so, that Bob Avakian has quoted many times: "The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." Now that stanza, which is the first stanza of a poem, The Second Coming, begins like this: "Turning and turning in a widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, and the center cannot hold." And I think this is very evocative of the kind of situation that we face. The cohering norms of society are being torn apart because there are these two sections of the ruling class, with one section not believing in how this society is functioning and wanting to radically change that, while the other section is just, as we've said a couple times already, is just trying to hold on to those oppressive norms. And all of this can cause people to question, along with the jolts that are going to disrupt people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in a time where not just over a year ago, one night, people went to sleep across this country, women, men, and women thought they were full human beings who had control in a basic way, even if it was under attack over their lives, their reproduction, their futures. And the next morning they wake up and there is no right to abortion. You know, maybe it's state by state, but at a national level, women are second-class citizens overnight. Just in the last few weeks, we saw affirmative action ripped away. We've seen Supreme Court decisions, this fascist Supreme Court, legalize discrimination against LGBTQ people. There's every day. I mean, these are just a few of the jolts. There's the Paul made a half joke about almost fainting in the attic, but we see raging fires. We see polluted, just destructive poison air hanging over New York City and other parts of the world as well. We see just one disruption after another taking place that, yes, disrupt people's daily lives, but they're taking place at a time when precisely their expectations that somehow this system is permanent, it's stable, it'll see things through. Maybe there's things they don't like, but they accept the system. The system itself and its norms are giving people reason to question. So these things kind of interact with each other.
Well, they ask, why are these things happening? And do they have to be this way? Mm-hmm. And there's the opening for the question, could they actually be different? But if people are, so the first point you're making in relationship to these big changes that our fascists are trying to ram through is that people's lives are disrupted. It's causing them to question the permanence of existing conditions. It's causing them to think about it. Why is it this way? Does it always have to be this way? But then, the other thing that happens is among the decent people, the people who really hate what's happening, who are upset by it, is that left to their own devices, they're going to strive to hope for to themselves get involved and come under the wing of the Democratic Party. That's the only choice that they have. That's the only good choice. Anything else will not lead where we need to go. And at the same time, many of them, in a tremendous amount right now, are filled with despair because they haven't in their thinking broken from the way things have been. And so they look out there and say, well, there's no hope.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important to understand that your life can be massively disrupted. Horrible things can happen, things that make you question. But then you're going to work your way through those questions with whatever pre-existing understanding of the world you have. Just you think about it. You get a disease, you might all of a sudden your whole life changes, but until you study that disease, you have no idea, or you go to a professional a doctor who has specialization in it, you have no idea what you're supposed to do about it. That's, again, back to Bob Avakian's interview on science. You need the tools to look beneath the surface. So on the surface, people are experiencing these disruptions, but they are still processing them. Oh my God, the only choice besides the fascist Republicans is the Democrats, or the woke lunacy that is going more and more lunatic, tear down individuals, cancel each other, retreat into a safe space, hide from the world. Or in this country, you have all the parasitic individualism, people retreating. You have people responding in the ways that they already were thinking, but in even more extreme forms. But there's more opening if we go out, if the revolutionaries go out and people learning about this go out and struggle with people. And I think about, and bring them revolution, bring them a different way, and fight with them against the ways that they've been trained to think that are really keeping them trapped into going along with this system. We can break them out of that in a heightened way right now. And I just wanted to say we had this really exciting little snapshot report at revcom.us about just a handful of people who went out to this nationwide librarian convention in Chicago and got out. We are the RevComs, the declaration we've put out, and talked to these librarians from all over the country. And these librarians are under attack for having Pride Month books, for having books on Black history. They're being persecuted. And some of the conversations reported in that snapshot written up by the people who went out were so interesting, where people said, I'm thinking of one of them, somebody said, I was in the civil rights movement. And I always thought, we've got a fight to wage, but we can make reforms, and we've made reforms, and we can keep fighting. But now, looking at what's happening in this country, I'm beginning to think we can't make it work. Maybe we do need a revolution. There's people were more open. There's many examples of that.
Yeah, there are. The RevComs went to one of these school board hearings where there are this tremendous reactionary things coming from the school board. Sometimes it's around books, sometimes it's around pride and LGBTQ rights. But the RevCom speaker there actually went and talked about that we are preparing for an actual revolution, that you have no answers to this, and this is what's needed. And whatever people understood about it, there was a lot of applause in that basically suburban community with a lot of reactionaries in it. Look, I think this is very important. It's a big part of what the work that revolutionaries have to do in this period. This is what you're saying. And we have to go up against the woke lunacy that you're doing. We also have to go up against just the rampant individualism, which is the big part of the ethos of bourgeois democracy and this system itself. And one of the forms it's taking right now is just a tremendous amount of turning inward and internalizing all of this. It's often taking forms in depression, addiction, lashing out at each other. These are stuff we have to struggle against. We have to struggle against American chauvinism, especially as this question of war developing, the question of religion and believing things unseen or controlling things, and actually all the varieties of that. There's the organized Christian fascists who are trying to turn this country into theocracy, but there's also all the spiritualism that keeps people from actually seeing the actual problem we face and the solution in a revolution. So, I think there's more to say about this, but I want to just bring it back to one point. The cohering norms of this system are fraying in that widening gyre. Things are falling apart. The center is still holding, but it's coming apart. The question is can we bring new cohering norms to people? New social relations, a constitution that is not about revenge, that is not about the private property of the few on the basis of exploiting the many. These are things that we can bring to people, that the climate doesn't, whether we can reverse it fully or not, I don't know. But one thing we can do is go to work on it and stop this dependence on the capitalist machine that runs on oil, including the whole defense apparatus, where the U.S. military is the largest user of oil, as we've put on the show many times, and fossil fuels altogether. So look, the point I'm trying to come to is the cohering norm. I'm repeating myself, I know. It's
important, yeah.
The cohering norms are coming undone. We have new cohering norms, and we have a new way that this society could be ruled to bring about a new system in the Constitution for a new socialist republic in North America that Bob Avakian wrote, that would bring in a socialist system where you could go to work on all of the legacy of the oppression and exploitation and outmoded social mores and morals that have existed for millennia. And we go to work on that as part of emancipating all of humanity.
Yeah. So in light of that, precisely, and I'm glad you repeated yourself, because it's important, and it's not well understood spontaneously. This is a time to not live on the surface of just the horrible things that the fascists are doing and the system is doing, and also not on the surface of just the really fucked up ways that so many people, including decent people, are reacting to this, retreating, crawling and chasing after the Democrats, getting caught up in stuff, all the things you're describing. If we who want change, if you who want change, tone it down because everybody else is getting caught up in bullshit, you're missing how much is pregnant beneath the surface with the potential to put on the map real revolution and a whole different way society could be organized. The demands in this proclamation that we put out, we need and we demand a whole new way to live, a fundamentally different system for this demand, which breaks down the new society. how we could solve the environmental crisis, how we could solve the rights and the needs of LGBTQ people and women, to redress discrimination, to give people the most fundamental right of all, people as a whole, to come together consciously, to change the world in a radical and emancipating way, and to debate that out, be part of that. We can bring this right now when the old cohering norms are breaking down and put it on the map, and this could take hold in this immediate period among thousands, tens of thousands, and soon millions in a way that is unprecedented because we are in unprecedented times. So precisely, don't live on the surface of the mood, but be a dynamic agent of changing that together with us.
Yeah, and there's a place for you in this, and that's something we'll get into more.
Mm-hmm.
We want to move now to Rafael, who will continue this theme of exposing what these fascists are doing through a cultural matter. It's hard to call this song a cultural matter, but I'm going to let Rafael tell you about it.
Fascist country singer and wannabe thug Jason Aldean just released a new song, which has already gotten tens of millions of views, called Try That in a Small Town. This is a straight up white supremacist lynching song, and it's a rallying cry for civil war. A lot of people have condemned it for being racist, which it is, but if you don't get the fascist political violence at the heart of it, you don't get where this is going. Let's watch.
Sucker punch somebody on a sidewalk, carjacking old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool, act a fool if you like, cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag and light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough, well try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road.
See how far you make it down the road? Think about it. Jason Aldean is saying that people who protest against police brutality or burn the flag in opposition to this country's crimes should get beaten down or even killed. And he's unleashing his millions of followers to do just that. These people can't wait to just wipe out everyone they hate. Black people, immigrants, people who don't conform to the patriarchal gender roles, and anyone who stands up against this system. No, he didn't specifically mention race, but who do you think his racist audience is thinking of and afraid of when he talks about crime? And when he says,
"Around here we take care of our own, you cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out, I recommend you don't."
Who do you think our own is? Do you think he's talking about the Muslim family next door? Or how about Jose and Maria working at the meatpacking plant? The trans kid in the small town high school? Or the 16-year-old girl who needs an abortion? No, as he put it, it's all about the good old boys raised up right.
Try that in a small town full of good old boys raised up right.
Well, who are the good old boys in this country?
Try that in a small town full of good old boys.
In case the message wasn't clear enough, he shot the video in front of the Maury County Courthouse in Columbia, Tennessee, the exact place where 18-year-old black youth Henry Choate was lynched in 1927 by a mob of hundreds of white people who attacked him with a sledgehammer, dragged his body through the streets, and then hung him from the second floor of the courthouse. In this very small town in Columbia, Tennessee, at least 20 black men and boys were lynched or disappeared by white mobs and the KKK. Jason Aldean's good old boys. Now fast forward to the modern day lynching of George Floyd by a sadistic pig who kneeled on Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, suffocating the life out of him while his fellow pigs looked on. Police murder after murder, beating after beating, video after video in small towns and big cities. And Jason Aldean wants people to just swallow this shit? Fuck yeah, people were right to come out in these streets, to express their anger, and yes, to cuss out these murdering cops, and yes, to stomp on that flag, which is nothing but a symbol of oppression, of slavery, genocide, and war, from the beginning of this country down to today. And they were right to defend themselves and each other from these murdering cops and these fascist scum attacking them. As We Are the RevCom says, we need to be involving masses of people and rising up to resist the continuing crimes of this system and defending people from attacks on their rights and their lives by racist, woman-hating, and anti-LGBTQ thugs in and out of government, all as part of preparing for revolution. And by the way, Jason, you lying MAGA moron, you cherry-picked a bunch of images to show protesters as violent and scary. But the truth is, the vast majority of violence during the George Floyd uprising came from police and fascist vigilantes like Kyle Rittenhouse. But you just want more of that kind of violence. As for trying this in a small town,
We'll try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road.
guess what, Jason? We did. Have you seen this map? And a lot of the protests in these towns were mostly white kids. That's right, your disobedient sons and daughters. That must really terrify you, huh, Jason? Lastly, to all the decent people who aren't trying to hold on to the good old days when good old boys ran the town, Native people were erased, and Black people and women knew their place, you need to face what is happening in this country. This is not just another racist country song. It is an incitement to civil war, and tens of millions of people are loving it. Right now, the society is more divided than it's been since the first Civil War in the 1860s. And these MAGA mobs are armed and itching for a new one and a fascist takeover, with the 2024 election very likely to be a key turning point one way or another. There is no going back to normal, and you shouldn't want to anyway. Instead of choosing sides in a new civil war, what we need are masses of people prepared to defeat these fascists as part of getting rid of the whole capitalist imperialist system which spawned them. A system which has white supremacy and male domination built into it, and right now is pushing humanity toward climate catastrophe and World War III. We've seen the potential for revolution in the powerful and courageous uprising of millions of people of all races in 2020. No, that didn't lead to fundamental change, because you can't end racist police murder with more Black cops and mayors and reforms and silly demands like defund and abolish the police. To end police terror, you need to abolish the whole system these police enforce and replace it with a completely different socialist system. If you've been discouraged, hopeless, turning inward, sleepwalking while this nightmare accelerates, that's unacceptable. The oppression that made you come into the streets in the first place is still there and getting worse, and there is a real way to fight it. So it's time to wake up and get organized, not just for an uprising, but for an actual revolution. To all those in small towns and big cities who have the heart to fight for something really worth fighting for, it's time to join the RevComs. As Bob Avakian wrote recently, especially at a time like this, a time when big things are up in the world, affecting the whole future of humanity. When those big-time exploiters and oppressors who rule over us in this country are bitterly divided among themselves and increasingly unable to hold things together as a unified ruling class. When there is not just an urgent need, but a real possibility to seize on this situation to overthrow them altogether. If you are not getting with the RevComs, the revolutionary communists who are working every day for this revolution, if you are not part of working to bring about this revolution, then what the hell are you doing?
At the last minute, we had to add the next segment. Sunsara and I were both listening to music from an artist who's the opposite of that fascist pig who we heard from before. Sinead O'Connor was a beautiful artist, a courageous artist who, I had a chance to briefly meet, but she's somebody who sang at a concert that we were involved in, resisting concert from the organization Refuse and Resist in the early 90s. And she stood with the people. That's the thing that really struck me. She took on the Catholic Church, God damn it. He took on the Catholic Church and its abuse of children before it was when it was highly unpopular. She ripped up a picture of the Pope on TV. She was so brave. She sang at a anniversary for Bob Dylan, and half of the crowd was booing. And she just stood there and stared at them. And then Chris Christopherson came and he put his arm around her, and she said, "I'm all right." And the band started playing the song, and she told him, "Stop."
Okay, turn this up. Until the philosophy which holds one race superior.
And she pulled out the artist in ears so they can hear themselves sing, and she screamed. She screamed in a lyrical way the song "War."
And abandoned everywhere is war.
And for her, it was a war against all forms of oppression. It was really a moment in the face of a howling mob of somebody standing up to it. And she had a beautiful voice.
She did.
And I think we were both tearing up listening to some of the songs. So I want to give you a chance to talk too, but I'm so moved by this. We're going to play one song or part of a song soon, Black Boys on Mopeds, little motorcycles. And she did it on a TV show here. We're going to show you at the beginning of this song, she tells you what we're going to do is she tells you why she's singing, and we'll just play the second verse, which it'll be clear from what she has to say.
Well, I don't want to say too much more. I mean, I appreciate what you said. I'll just say for anybody who was alive and even not paying attention, when Sinead O'Connor, when she emerged on the scene, everybody remembers her silhouette with no hair, singing with such heart and feeling. I mean, everybody remembers it. And then when she ripped up that picture of the Pope, I think it just busted open. I mean, I know for me personally, I was very young, and it just changed it was scandalous and so inspiring. And it broke something in your assumptions in society. And she had a lot of courage, and she paid an incredible price for always speaking her conscience. And so, I think we should see that.
That's an important point. I mean, she was hounded.
It's true.
Hounded. This system has no love for anybody who stands against it as implacably as she did at that time. Mm-hmm. And the music industry was treating her like trash at that point. And there were a few courageous artists who defend her. And I just want to say we're going into this rare time, and we need more artists to take that kind of stand with their art and with their voice. And she did that. And last, she did suffer terribly from mental illness and tremendous tragedy, including recently. And when she first came down with mental illness, she went public with it and shared it with the public. And she took up a lot of different causes. Some good, some not so good. But the one that was, she also stood with the Irish people in their struggle, and she's did some beautiful songs that you can find online with the Chieftains. But we're going to go play this one bit of the song, Police Who Kill Black Boys on Mopeds. So watch this and take a listen to Sinead O'Connor and see what a beautiful and heroic artist can do, and read about it and see how she really changed lots of young women like yourself, and all of us who were looking for people who would stand up against this machine.
Well, I wrote this song probably about 21 years ago. when I was living in England, and at that time in England, it was rather a racist society. For example, if a black person burgled a house and it was written about in the newspaper, it would say, in bold letters, it would say black burglar. It wouldn't say just burglar, as if it was an issue what the colour was of the person that burgled your house, Anyway, so there was near me, there were two young boys, maybe 14 and 13, who had borrowed their cousin's moped. The police had assumed that they stole the moped, and they chased the two boys, who kind of panicked and smashed into the side of a petrol station and ended up dead. So it's not a happy song. So it wouldn't make you want to live in England, basically. England's not the mythical land of Madame George and roses. It's the home of police who kill black boys on mopeds. I love my boy, and that's why I'm leaving. I don't want him to be aware that there's any such thing as grieving. Young mother down at Smithfield, 5 a.m. looking for food for her kids. In her arms she holds 3 gold babies, and the first word that they learned was please. These are dangerous days. To say what you feel is to dig your own grave. Remember what I told you. If you were of the world, they would love you. But England's not the mythical land of Madame George and roses. It's the home of police who kill black boys on mopeds. And I love my boy, and that's why I'm leaving. I don't want him to be aware that there's any such thing as grieving.
So in today's program, we're going to show you a portion of Raymond Lotta's speech at Revolution Books in New York City. The title of his talk was Robert Oppenheimer Served America's Empire. We have the responsibility and the possibility to end this horror and bring a far better world into being. In the segment, we're going to show you Raymond speaks about the film politically, ideologically, morally. It's a very sharp direction for how to understand the message of this film and how to understand Robert Oppenheimer and the actions of the U.S. at that time and the empire that came as a result of this. It's a comprehensive speech. Having heard this segment that we're going to play today, I myself want to go to the website revolutionbooksnyc.org to see the entire speech, because he begins with a description of what this weapon actually meant in Hiroshima, and then he goes into the actual political contours of World War II, and then he goes back to the film. That's the middle part of his speech you're going to see, and then he talks about what is to be done today in getting rid of the danger of nuclear war and the constitution for a new socialist republic that would go to work on eliminating all nuclear weapons. So we want to go now to Raymond Lotta as the last segment of today's RNL Revolution Nothing Less show.
The film Oppenheimer is not the film for our times, although it is a film of our times. It is not offering the history lessons that we need. As an article on revcom.us points out, Christopher Nolan's film, which portrays the moral ambiguity of people like Oppenheimer, who ushered in this horrific weapon and war crime, and the nuclear arms race he came to regret, is itself full of unacceptable moral relativism and apologia for what the U.S. did in World War II. The film never reckons with the nature of the crime and doesn't even show, as we did, what happened in Hiroshima, and continues to propagate this as a tough but necessary decision in the war where the U.S. was the good guys. Now, there are people who, after watching the film Oppenheimer, will leave the theater thinking about the persecution that befell Oppenheimer for speaking out against the arms race. Indeed, he was used in the project to develop this ghastly weapon, and then, along with others, became the victim of repression and the career-destroying witch hunts that followed World War II, as the U.S. launched an anti-communist crusade targeting the then-socialist Soviet Union, the Communist Party of the U.S., which was not a revolutionary party, but which did support the Soviet Union, and progressives and radical-minded people. But think about this. The immediate issue with Oppenheimer and the hearings that destroyed him was whether he would keep his security clearance. That is, would Robert Oppenheimer be able to continue to lend his expertise to the machinery, to the genocidal machinery of empire? There are some who will see this film and come out reflecting on the prospects and the horror of nuclear apocalypse. But the film Oppenheimer detaches this danger and this horror from the system of capitalism, imperialism, that produces these weapons, that perfects these weapons, that modernizes these weapons, the system that thinks and plans the unthinkable. Barbarous wars to extend and enforce the interests of empire, even nuclear war that could wipe out civilization. There are also some who see in this film a picture of Oppenheimer as a patriotic dissenter, a patriotic independent thinker who was punished for being that. This is the viewpoint of a review and reflection piece in The Nation by its editor Katerina Vanderhoeven. But here's the real lesson. Patriotism and loyalty to your imperialist country, even in its most quote-unquote enlightened variations, leads to service for these imperialist monsters. And we live in the belly of the beast, the heartland of imperialism. And as Bob Avakian emphasizes, it is our responsibility to focus our energies on exposing and opposing the crimes of the U.S. empire, its preparations for war, and work to make revolution, to overthrow this system as soon as possible. If we lived in Russia, our responsibility would be to oppose our rulers there. And so too, if we lived in China. But we fucking live in America. And the people of the world, in countries that have been invaded and occupied by U.S. imperialism, whose natural resources have been stolen and poisoned, whose children have been driven into sweatshops, and 45,000 children working in the cobalt mines of Congo. The women in the countries that have become part of the global supply chains for a global sex industry of unspeakable degradation and cruelty. The people of the world are counting on us not to perfect this empire, not to perfect this union, but to put this empire into the museum of history.
All right, so this brings us to the end of today's RNL, Revolution Nothing Less show, our 158th episode. We want to thank you for tuning in, and definitely come back next week, next Thursday, every Thursday.
All right. Yeah. And it's what time? 5 p.m. Pacific time. But you need to click that notification button and subscribe, because sometimes YouTube takes a while to process the file, and you can find out that way in a notification what time it's really going to appear. But usually it appears at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Central time, and 8 p.m. Eastern time. And with that, I just want to thank the entire Revolution Nothing Less crew who worked very hard on this episode. In fact, we're working sort of through the night to get it done for you on Thursday, and we'll see you next week.